Shalom. I want to give all praise to Yahweh, by Yashim Yahweh Shai, by Yashim Kakadash. Give honors to the apostles and elders that rule well, and peace and blessings to you brothers out there that's kicking his word in sincerity, also in truth. Before I start speaking, I'd like to play you all a video. And then from this video, I'd like to build off of, build on it and expound on why I decided to play this video for you guys. And let me share my screen for you all, and we'll just go ahead and dive right into it, All right, this is it right here.
As a interesting piece over at theweek.com. You'll recall back, I think it was Tuesday of this week, I was talking about how middle-aged, middle-class white men are committing suicide and dying from alcoholism and drug addiction at a rate that is causing the death rate for the entire cohort of white men from roughly 35 to 60, or 35 to 54, as I recall, was the age range, is causing their death rate to go up in ways that we haven't seen since the collapse, in any demographic like that, since the collapse of the Soviet Union. For a couple of years there after the collapse of the Soviet Union, similarly, you saw men dying like this for this reason. And it was, because of economic uncertainty. But Ryan, and the thing that I had missed in my analysis of this, I talked about racism. I talked about how, my dad had that white middle class dream, of when he came back from World War II, getting a job in a tool and die shop and getting a home in a suburb with the GI Bill and all these things that most African Americans were blocked from in the 50s. And my point was, we need to be sure, if we're going to put this economy back together, if we're going to change our trade policies, if we're going to bring our factories home, if we're going to put our cities back to work, that we do so in a way that's colorblind, or to the extent it can be, that is all inclusive. Because by and large, the middle class boom in the 50s, I mean, we were a legally segregated society at that time. That boom was largely confined to white men about the age who are committing suicide now. And they're committing suicide because that future that they thought they had, that they grew up with, looking back on their parents, they don't have it. But Brian Cooper says poor white Americans are dying of despair and racism is to blame. And, I thought this was fascinating. He says, well, basically, that poverty he says, American poverty is increasingly brutal. Male wages in the bottom fifth of the income ladder, for instance, have fallen by over 30% since the late 60s, and inequality has exploded. These days, those in the top 1% capture virtually all economic growth. I mean, if you've ever listened to Bernie Sanders, you know that to be the case. But then it gets really interesting. He says, now, the reason that, okay, you've got that, and you've got all these white, quote, middle-class men, middle-aged middle-class men who, in a previous generation, right now at this point in their lives, would have been making, in today's dollars, $30,000, $40,000 a year. In some cases, much more than that, $50,000, $60,000 a year. In some cases, and even $70,000 in some of the more specialized factory jobs. And now they're laid off. They don't have a job, and the social safety net in America is not strong enough to catch them. Right? Unemployment has been limited to a year in most places. The Republicans 2 years ago refused to extend long-term federal unemployment. It still has, it's still blocked. Welfare is only available for a maximum of 5 years. We are, 6 or 7 years into a Great Recession. And he points out that the reason why during the Clinton administration they cut back on welfare, during the Reagan administration they cut back on housing and education assistance, during just basically through this whole thing, is that and why universities have become more expensive. They've done away with free education. disability insurance, unemployment insurance, all dialed back, no child allowance, no paid vacation, stuff like that. The reason all that stuff has gone away is because historically, the white people who are the majority of the vote against it because this is going back to Reagan's welfare queen thing. They believed that these welfare benefits were going to black people. And the white people were saying, we don't want to be paying taxes to be supporting a bunch of black freeloaders. And now the white people are in the position of needing those resources, and they're not there, which is something African Americans could have told you for a long, long time. Not to mention that the jobs aren't there, which has been the case for African Americans for a long, long time. So I wanted to update my rant. I thought that was just a fascinating insight and a really worthwhile one. To watch more.
So, when you look into the history, and also when you look at Edomites contemporarily speaking, the concept of righteousness was really is synonymous with dominance. And so to obtain that dominance, if you will, they will lie, they will steal, and they will be very vicious. I was actually watching a vid today, and it was going into how these Edomites used to have sex farms and things of that nature. And also on the sex forms, you had it to where these men would have it to where they would breed, a son with his mother, a father with his daughter. They would be raping little boys. They would be raping man in front of their children. And all that was about dominance. So the concept of righteousness wasn't about having or is having morality. It's about obtaining that top level in society, right? And so this ideology has been used as a rationalization to create a caste system throughout history. Uh, Contemporarily, we see this warped idea of righteousness affect their own people, which is beautifully illustrated in this video. Now, when you look at the Greek philosophers thought that certain people were intellectually inferior than others, and nature placed them at the bottom of society, making them quote natural slaves. A similar concept is seen in Christianity and also social Darwinism. So I wanted to examine the mindset of the so-called white man, which you know to be the Edomites. Okay. Now this is according to bcc.com. It says ancient philosophers justifying slavery. Throughout history, there has been people who attempted to justify slavery. Many of them did so purely on out of self-interest in order to continue a barbaric trade. But some historical philosophers sought to justify slavery from the best inventions. Now, this is Aristotle. The Greek philosopher Aristotle was one of the first. He thought that slavery was a natural thing and that human beings came in two types, slaves and non-slaves. For that some shall rule a other people. It's like for that some shall rule and other be ruled is a thing not only necessary but expedient. For the hour of their birth, some are marked out for subjection, other for rule. Now, when you read the scriptures, the scriptures are pro-Israel. It's all about Israel, and also it's about putting really stating how we are God's chosen people. But within that concept, there is a certain way in which we were supposed to treat the heathen, man. we're not supposed to go to these various lands and oppress them. You see, it actually talks about that in Numbers, uh, Numbers the 30th chapter. Let's see, no, in fact, let's go about 35. This we're supposed to be treating treating people. You know, you don't use the scriptures as a rationalization, to man like the so-called white man has done. You know what I'm saying? The so-called white man went to these various lands, and he'll use the concept of superiority as a means, to strip those people of their natural resources, maim those people, destroy those people, man. And we're not supposed to do that. You see? In fact, I know it says you shall not defile the land with blood. No, it's enough. There it goes, 35 and 33. So I was in the right place. Now, this is Numbers 35. So shall ye not pollute the land wherein ye are found the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. So a lot of times when we read that, we read that as a cut to the so-called white man, which is true. That is a cut to the so-called white man, but we have to factor in this was our law. We weren't supposed to go. We're not supposed to go to various lands and oppress the people of that land. Also we're not supposed to oppress a stranger. You know, we're not supposed to oppress a stranger that's in our land, man. You see, I don't want to digress too much. You see, but the so-called white man, he used this, his thought or his idea of superiority as a rationalization to commit all types of atrocities. For him, the top again is those that have power, and so to attain that power, this man would do anything. You know, lie, cheat, steal. You see, another beautiful example of that are the so-called what were the conflict between Edomites and our Native American brothers, our so-called Native American brothers, the Gadites. There was various treaties that were made, and all the treaties were broken by the so-called white man. I believe there was over 100 treaties. Why is that? Because this man was bloodthirsty for dominance, and he obtained that dominance by any means. You see, and they used things like nature or social Darwinism as a rationalization for him destroying us, man. Because we have to factor in slavery. He thought that we was he didn't think, he said that we were fourths of a human being, and so that made us natural slaves, or less of humans, much like cattle. You see. So back to the article. Some people, he said, were born natural slaves and ought to be slaves under any circumstances. Other people were born to rule. These slaves could use these slaves as they please and could treat them as property. You see that? You see? So with that mindset, the so-called white man rationalized all different amounts of atrocities, man. Making certain contraptions that would basically dislocate our testicles, man. You know, again, they were rapists, men and women. Raping men in front of their children, had sex slaves. You see, to where people would go there just to freak off, man. You see what I'm saying? This is the so-called white, so-called concept of white men. When you look into, uh, uh, you know, uh, the scriptures and this concept of slavery, man, it has rules and regulations, man. You weren't supposed to, you weren't supposed to treat them like cattle and just totally beat and destroy your slaves, man. There was a way in which you're supposed to live, and certainly you ain't gonna break the law by committing adultery and sleep with another man's or woman, regardless if he's a slave or not. Raping little kids, things of that nature. That's not in the scriptures, man. You see, and so that's a huge misconception. But again, back to uh, the article. Some people, he said, were born natural slaves and ought to be slaves under any circumstances. Other people were born to rule the slaves, could use the slaves as they please and could treat them as property. Natural slaves were slaves because their souls weren't complete. Now, what does that sound like? That sounds like Christianity. You know, that sounds like social Darwinism, which we're going to get. They lack certain qualities, such as the ability to think properly. And so they needed to have masters to tell them what to do. It's clear that Aristotle thinks that slaves were good for those who were born natural slaves, as without masters, they wouldn't have known how to rule their lives. You see, and that's that again. That's that propaganda that the so-called white man uses again as a rationalization to go and to steal, people and their resources, man. And you see the same ideology when dealing with the Muslims, which we're not pro-Muslim, but for argument's sake, look what the so-called white man has done in the Middle East. Case in point, when you look up um, Afghanistan, the production of opium has increased substantially, over 300%. Because the so-called white man went over there and bombed that land to hell, and then stole that natural resource, man. You see, back to script, back to the article. It's clear that Aristotle thinks that slavery was good for those who were born natural slaves, as without masters they wouldn't have known how to rule their lives. In fact, Aristotle seem to have thought that slaves were living tools, rather like domestic animals fit only for physical labor. And indeed, the use made of slaves and of tame animals is not very different, for both with their bodies minister to the needs of life. You see, and if you do research, the Greeks were the ones that actually created chattel slavery. You know, and again, there's different methods of slavery, man. And we see, you know, how the so-called white man plays out his definition of slavery, which is total debauchery. You see, slaves were not totally incapable of thought, but they only needed minimal amount of rational ability, just enough to understand and carry out their duties. Similarly, um, slaves were not devoid of virtue, but once again, they only needed just enough to carry out their duties, because their virtue was enough for them to be treated as human beings. You see, and again, that makes me think about these Edomites, during the time of slavery, and how they deemed us as 3/4 of a human being. Man, they call us less of a human being. You know, through the pseudosciences. You see, actually, if you do research on anthropology, the father of anthropology, which is Johannes Blumenbach, and you had other people that came before him. I want to say Carl, uh, Lin, what's it, Linnaeus. Yeah, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Linnaeus. You know, they thought, which he thought that, and alluding to Carl, he thought that everybody else was basically a delusion of so-called white people through diet and environments, and so with that being said, all these they deemed us as less of humans, you see, and with that understanding, man, you could commit all types of atrocities, man, you see, because in your mind, these particular people alluding to us, they can't feel. You see, case in point, the father of gynecology. You see, he was performing all types of experiments on our women, and wouldn't giving them any medicine, pain medicine, things of that nature, because he said, you know what, they can't feel. You see, so with that wicked ideology, you know the so-called white man is able to do all types of manners of wickedness, man. You see, but let's keep reading on this. Um, Aristotle doesn't provide any sensible practical method of reconciling natural slaves, and without that, it's inevitable that some people will be made slaves who should not be. Uh, Recognized, like I said, recognizing. Aristotle has also had a category of legal slaves. They weren't natural. They weren't natural slaves, but through bad luck, perhaps being taken prisoner in war, they just happened to be slaves at a particular time. Aristotle argued that if the world was just, the legal slaves would be free, and if any natural slaves were by chance free, they should be made slaves. Plato, Plato, this is Plato. The Greek philosopher Plato thought similarly that it was right for the better to rule over the inferior. Now, with that understanding, with that understanding, take a look at how the world is being ran. Do people really think that the so-called white man, should have any say so in how the world should operate, man? Under his rule, you see homosexuality, flourish, which creates all types of pestilence. STDs are at an all-time high, right? You see, you see, people strung out on all types of drugs, and these so-called developed countries, depression at an all-time high. People are killing themselves, which seems to be a luxury for people that's living, in these developed countries. People, statistically speaking, people that are in developed countries don't kill themselves, man. You see, what else you see? Pollution of the earth, all types of animals, uh, you know, being destroyed. So I let you know what that this man has no right to tell anybody, how to rule. But the Most High set him up to be that perfect demon, man, to put hell on the earth. You see what I'm saying? To put hell on the earth, and this is what we see. Okay. This is what we see. Let me grab this quick scripture in Proverbs. Get Proverbs 3. Proverbs 29 for y'all. See here. Hopefully this will pull up quickly. If not, then I'll just read it out my sword. Just go in beautifully what I'm talking about. Proverbs 29 and 16. Proverbs 29:16. When the wicked are multiplied, transgression increases, but the righteous shall see his fall. That's right. So when the wicked are increased or multiplied or ruling, what do you see? Well, you see all types of manner of wickedness, man. And the so-called white man, under his rulership, you see nothing but death, destruction, and calamity. You know, and it's because he is the son of perdition. You know, he has no right ruling this planet Earth. You see? Well, back to the script, back to the article. Now, again, this is Plato. The Greek philosopher Plato thought similarly that it was right for the better to rule over the inferior. Nature herself imitates that it is just for the better to have more than the worse, the more powerful than the weaker, and in many ways she shows among man as well as among animals, and indeed among hosts of cities and races, that justice consists in the superior ruling over and having more than the inferior. Homer. Homer seems to have thought that even if a person wasn't inferior before they became a slave, enslaving them changed them in such a way as to make them a natural slave. Jove takes half the goodness out of a man when he makes a slave of him. Jove is Jupiter. Okay, now let's get into Christian theologians. This is Saint Augustine. The prime cause then of slavery is sin, which brings a man under the domination of his fellow. That which does not happen save by the judgment of the Most High, with whom is no righteousness, and who knows how to award fit punishment to every variety of offense. But you know what? He is exactly right. On a larger scale, because we wasn't following after the will of the Heavenly Father, this white man was able to go, uh, you know, basically rule over us and dominate us, man, and destroy us. On the left hand side, the so-called white man has been set up to be, a whooping stick for the Most High, and he has done his job to the T. But soon we're seeing, his rulership. You know, but now we're seeing his rulership wane. Which eventually, when the Most High sends his son back, Yahweh Shai, he's going to be destroyed. And you see that in instances like this. You see his ways and his understanding is starting to fall on himself, man. You see, St. Augustine thought that slavery was inevitable. He didn't think that it was the result of natural laws of the universe. Indeed, he thought that in a pure world, slavery would be quite unnatural. But in other world, uh, but in our world, it was the consequence of sin and the fall of man. Slavery was known unto Augustine. What slavery was unknown, Augustine said, until righteous Noah branded the sin of his son, which with that name and established the principle that the good were entitled uh, were were entitled to use the simple. But it is just as we believe that the conditional slavery is a result of sin, and this is why we do not find the words slave in any part of scriptures until righteous Noah branded the sin of his son with this name. It is a name therefore introduced by sin and not by nature. Again, so which he is correct because of sin. You know, you know, Ham was to serve um was to serve his brother. You see, but here's the kicker: the Most High gave us, which we're not Hamites, we are Shemitic. He gave us a way in which we're supposed to rule over these people, man. You're not supposed to treat people, wickedly, man. There's a certain way in which we're supposed to deal with these heathens. You see, and the so-called white man doesn't exemplify what's spoken in these scriptures. You see, he does the complete opposite. Again, committing homosexual acts with his slaves. Raping women that are married. Forcing ancestry. That has nothing to do with the scriptures. You see. So let's go to the next person, Aquinas. For a man of outstanding intelligence, naturally to command, while those who are less intelligent but of some robust physique seem intended by nature to act as servants. Aquinas largely agreed with Augustine that slavery was the result of the fall, but he also thought that the universe did have a natural structure that gave some men authority over others. And you see, again, this ideology where in the concept of social Darwinism. You see, GMS Amathia 144, Solomon Proverbs 29:2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked bear rule, the people mourn. That's totally right, man. You see, that's totally right, and that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the whole world mourning. In particular, us, the true Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Because we had the wicked that are ruling. See what I'm saying? GMS desiring truth. Shalom, Mat, Yahweh, Bashim, Yahshua, Bashim, Kakadash. Sirach 10:1. A wise judge will instruct his people, and the government of a prudent man is well ordered. That's right. And you don't see the so-called white man ruling in prudence. You see him, ruling with impulse. Impulse and trying to make the quickest dollar, and that's why this place is ran with debt. You see, debt and interest, usury, and things of that nature. Not with righteousness. Eventually, all these people are going to have to pay back their debt. So why would you give them, debt in which they couldn't pay back? That doesn't make any sense. That's not prudent. You see. So now we're starting to see that the so-called white man, he's not the hunk of the earth. He's not the most intelligent. In fact, he's quite the opposite, impulsive, and vicious, you know, and unrighteous. You see, let's get back to it. Aquinas largely agreed with Augustine that slavery was the result of the fall, but he also thought that the universe did have a natural structure that gave some men authority over others. He justified this by pointing out that the uh, uh, what's that heretical heretical uh, uh, nature of heaven, where some angels were superior to others. Whatever. Aquinas had a much higher opinion of slaves than Aristotle. He considered that slaves had some restrictive rights, and which that's really it on that. Now I want to take a look at social Darwinism, because these Edomites, uh, they greatly they use basically religion as a tool for Edomite supremacy. And so when they use that, they got tired of the rules and regulations, and really wanted to be the freaks that they were. They move out of that the whole concept of God and the scriptures into pseudosciences, in which they use again these pseudosciences as a means to um, as a rationalization to commit all types of atrocities. And when you look at the word pseudo, it's in Latin, it just simply means false. Okay, false sciences, false ways, man, because science means to know. Now, this is social Darwinism. Social Darwinism, the theory that human groups and races are subject to the same law of nature, now of natural selection, as Charles Darwinism had perceived in plants and animals in had perceived in plants and animals in nature. According to this theory, which was popular in the 19th and 20th century, in 20th centuries, the weak were diminished and their cultures delimited, while the strong grew in power and in cultural influence over the weak. And that's why you see a Edomite hegemony around the world, man. You see, because they believe that the weak have the right to impose their culture on the world. And with that understanding, that's why you see a so-called liberation of sex. You know, in the Middle East, you're starting to see homosexual rallies and things of that nature. Why is that? Because this is the will of the Edomites. You see, which the Greeks are also Edomites. Let's go to First Maccabees. Now, this is First Maccabees 1:7. Now, keep in mind, we just read the philosopher's thought. The Greek philosophers' thought on race, right? Which is very, very similar to what we see in Christianity and also in social Darwinism. You see, us again going back to the main topic, a thought process which states that dominance is righteousness. You see, without any rules and regulations, but obtaining dominance, that is considered righteousness. Okay. Now this is First Maccabees 1:7. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule everyone in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. That's right. So when you had the Greeks begin to rule, after Alexander the Great, he died at age 33. Which he ruled around, I think he around 300 I think the Greek Empire was from 301 to no, about 146 to about 330 BC, if I'm not mistaken. You see? And so when Alexander got in there, man, he conquered all the known world, from Macedonia all the way to parts of India, which is very impressive. And when he died, his generals placed crowns on themselves. Now, the two main generals that we see spoken about here in the scriptures is the Ptolemy and Seleucus. Okay, and you see the Seleucian Empire ruled in the north and in Syria, and the Ptolemaic Empire was in the south in North Africa, in particular in Egypt. You see, and so when these two kings began to rule, they started putting, placing or forcing their culture on us. You see, in which you had some of our people consenting with that. Okay, but again, they did that because of what their concept of righteousness is: dominance, taking over somebody, killing, maiming. That's why their blessing is what? The sword. You see what I'm saying? You see? Now this is First Maccabees 1 and again 7. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surname Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 130th and 70th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out a of wicked of Israel wicked man, who persuaded many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we have departed from them, we have had much sorrow." So this device pleased them. So you had our people; they were assimilating to the way of the heathen, man. It was taking on basically the word assimilate means taking on another person's way of life. They were assimilating to um, the way of the heathen. See, verse 13. Then certain of the people were so forward within that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinance of the heathen. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. Now, that's really it on that. So our people sold to do wickedness after the heathen, man. But see, um, that's why the scriptures say never to trust thy enemies, man. Because just because he gave us those rights, guess what? He made those pact with us, just like he did the so-called Native Americans, and then he eventually began to take us over and to kill us and to ransack our villages and our temple, man. You see, which goes back to what? It goes back to the curses, man. If you follow after the way of the heathen, you will be punished, and that's what happened to our people. Okay, now this is First Maccabees 1:41. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his law. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbath. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judea that they should follow the strange law of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbath and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts, that they should also lead their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manners of uncleanness and profanation, to the end they might forget the law and change the ordinance. And whosoever would not do according to the commandments of the king, he said, he should die. You see that? So this was a force. They forced us to follow after their way. And if we did not want to comply, guess what? They were going to kill us, man. Beat us out of us. You see? And that again, that goes back to what that concept of their concept of righteousness is what dominance. You see what I'm saying? Their concept of righteousness is you know what, I'm going to take you over because you're inferior to me. You see that happen where? Well, you see that happen in slavery, man. You see that happening. You see that happen in slavery. You know, when we were brought over here, they beat they beat who we were out of us, to the point to where there's a controversial as to who we are. Some people call us Africans, which we know that was made by a so-called white man. You know, we know that what that that there we go, right here. This one, I want to show you guys this. I recommend that y'all watch this because it breaks it down beautifully, man. You know, which we know that we are the true Israelites, man. You see, so our people coming over here, even in slave ships, you know, they forced us to comply with. You know, they forced us to adhere to Christianity, man. You know, to the point where you had some of us that was committing suicide, man. Um much like the Maccabees, man. And well, during the time of the Maccabees, excuse me. You know, you had it to where our people were jumping off these ships because they didn't want to be slaves to this heathen, this dog. You know, when we got over here, we were forced to speak their language. We was forced to worship their pagan god, Jesus. It's forced down our throat. Okay, much like what you see what happened here, you know, in the time of Maccabees, man. Okay, and again, they use that concept of dominance as a means to do this. Okay, now back to social Darwinism. Social Darwinism, the theory that human groups and races are subject to the same laws of natural selection as Charles Darwinism has perceived in plants and animals in nature. According to the theory, which was popular in the late 19th and early 20th century, the weak were diminished and their cultures eliminated, while the strong grew in power and in culture and cultural influence over the weak. Social Darwinists held that the life of humans in society was a struggle for existence ruled by survival of the fittest. And we know what that means to the so-called white man. He's going to do whatever it takes to get that dominance, man. You see? A phrase proposed by the British philosopher and scientist Herbert Spencer. If you do research on Herbert Spencer was related to Charles Darwin. The social Darwinists, notably Spencer and Walter Bagehot in England and William Graham Summer in the United States, believed that the process of natural selection acting on variations in the population will result in the survival of the best competitors and continuing improvement in the population. Societies were viewed as organisms that evolved in this manner. This theory was used to support uh, laissez-faire capitalism and political conservative conservation. No, conservatism. Slakia. Now, going back to this very interesting article of what actually a video that I played at the beginning, laissez-faire uh, to do basically means a policy of minimal governmental interference in the economic affairs of individuals and society. So when you look at the plight of poor white Americans, this is um, really this has to do with what you see. If you go back at the beginning of, or actually just listen to this vid, you had these conservatives, voting against uh, you know, public assistance, and now that the the country sold them out, guess what? They're in need, but they can't obtain it. Why is that? Because they voted against certain laws to take care of poor. Because guess what? They deemed the poor as you know basically as what's the word I'm looking for? Basically unfit for public assistance, and also they were supposed to be at the bottom. We was messing by helping the poor. We're messing with the caste system. So now they're at the bottom, and what are they doing? They're killing themselves, man. You see. So this man ways is destroying him. Okay. Now let's get this and do in Thessalonians. Now this is Second Thessalonians 2 and 3. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. And we are in these days in which that man of sin is being revealed, which are Edomites, which again are you so-called white people, you Europeans, majority of you Europeans, you are the sons of perdition. You see, because you have done what a demon would do. You have done what a demon would do, and that's not racist or anything like that. That is facts. You see, you went and destroyed everybody, their lands, the way of living, stripped them of their natural resources, raped their women, raped their men, raped their children. That's very demonic, man. And then tell them, and then have the audacity to tell us to get over it. And for that, you're going to be destroyed, man. Okay? But first, you're being revealed. And you can't even take being revealed. What's so ironic about this? Okay? Back to the scriptures. Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And what did we just read about? We just read about social Darwinism. We just read about the philosophers of the Greeks, okay, and what and their thoughts on the slaves, okay, and they use that rationalizations to deem who they thought fit to be at the top at the bottom, okay, showing himself that he is God. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things, and now ye know what withholdeth that he might be revealed in his time. He is being revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. That's right. So now we're in the process of the so-called white man. He's being taken out of the way, you know, in a strong way. That and ultimately he's gonna be taken out of the way by Yahweh, by Shemi Hawashai. You see what I'm saying? Now, but in small way, he's being taken away by what? His philosophy, his way. Okay? And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. And right now, the so-called white man is being destroyed with the spirit of Yahweh by Shemi Hawashai. See, scriptures in St. John 17:17 says, what? Sanctify them with truth. Thy word is truth, man. And we are being sanctified with the true understanding of the scriptures, man. And it's something to be thankful about. Okay? It's very important that we are. And this man is about to be taken out of the way, man. Hey, brothers, this dude is about to be taken out of the way. Call Allah Yahweh by Shemi Hawashai. Okay? Now this is Proverbs 64:8. So they shall make their own tongues to fall upon themselves. All that seeth them shall flee away. That's right. Look at the global economy due to the so-called white man. Every country is basically in unsurmountable debt. Well, almost every country is in unsurmountable debt because of his philosophy, man, which is going to be a catalyst to start what? World War III. Okay? And the person that has perpetuated all this debt, which you know to be U.S., it's going to be destroyed. Okay? And Most High is going to put the spirit on these other nations to rise up against America. All right? I would get Habakkuk the second chapter, but for time's sake, because I have to leave out here quickly. For time's sake, I'm just gonna get a couple more scriptures and get out your brother's way. Okay. Now, it's Deuteronomy 30, verse 7. Deuteronomy 30:7. And Yahweh thy power will put all these curses upon thy enemies and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. That's right. The so-called white man, his way is destroying him. Hey, call Allah Yahweh by Shemi Hawashai, man. We're gonna see more. We're going to see more of these white people, fighting amongst each other. Okay, we're going to start seeing. We're going to see more and more of these Edomites killing themselves. Committing suicide because they can't find job or they can't provide for their families. You see, and this is a beautiful thing, man, because you have ruled the world in pure wickedness, man. And for that, okay, you're going to be destroyed by the Heavenly Father. So this is a beautiful thing that we're seeing. Okay. Now, this is Baruch 4:30. Take a good heart, O Jerusalem, for he that gave thee that name will comfort thee. Miserable are they that afflicted thee and rejoice at thy fall. Miserable are the cities which thy children served. Miserable is she that received thy sons. For as the rejoice at for as she rejoiced at thy ruin, was glad of thy fall, so shall she be grieved for her own desolation. And that's why you had the whole campaign to make America great again, in which that's not going to work. Here now we have Trump. He's in these various trade wars with these with the Moabites, the Chinese, and also the Magog, which is Russia. You know, all because for various reasons. Well, you have it to where China or the East is starting to move away from America's grip by establishing its own trade and also establishing its own country. You had Gazprom just prom finish a pipeline. I want to say earlier this year that's going to connect Russia to China and going to pump gas, you know, to China. Which now China is the number one importer of gas. You see China and Russia. China really making the new currency, the petro yuan, which is a gold backed currency. Okay, you have these various countries, that are opposing the uh, the unilateral movements of America. Okay, because it's messing with their money. Case in point, the whole idea with Iran. So big things are going on, man. You know, because of it, because of America's greed, really the Edomites' greed, man. We're gonna see them infight. The Egyptian is rising up against the Egyptian. This is gonna cause their destruction. But before that destruction, we're gonna see social unrest, man. And this is a beautiful day. You know, this is a beautiful day for us. Okay. For I will take, verse 34, for I will take away the rejoicing of her multitude, and her pride shall be turned into mourning. For fire shall cover upon her from the everlasting, long to endure, and she shall be inhabited of devils for a great time. You see, this place is going to be inhabited by owls. you know, like it says in uh uh you know like it says in Isaiah. See if I can get that for y'all. That's right. Now this is Isaiah 13. I'll start up. You start up. I'm gonna start at 9 for you. Um Now this is Isaiah 13:9. Behold, the day of Yahweh cometh, cruel both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners thereof of it. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine. And I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. And I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the gold wedge of Ophir. So the Most High is going to come. He's going to destroy all the workers of iniquity. Who's the main source of wickedness on the planet Earth today? The so-called white man. Let's just be clear. You know, who's creating all these wars? You know, Who's creating racism? People I say, oh, you guys are the bitches. Yeah, that's reverse racism, man. No, man, it's a thing. It's a term called indignation, man. The so-called white man has done all these wicked things. We can't say anything about it. We're supposed to get over it. The audacity of you so-called Edomites, man. The Most High is going to destroy you, man. Okay? And we're going to read about it. Therefore, I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place in the wrath of Yahweh of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. And it shall be as the chase roes, and as a sheep that no man taketh up. They shall every man turn to his own people, and flee every one unto his own land. Everyone that is found shall be thrust through, and everyone that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. So you got a lot of our people who are coons who want to join hand in hand with the so-called white man. Guess what? You're going to be destroyed raw on with them. The scripture saying Proverbs join hand in hand, the wicked shall not go unpunished. So if you are for, the Edomite supremacy or Edomite hegemony, you know, which is the dominant culture, if you will. The Most High is not dealing with you, man. You see what I'm saying? Everyone that is found shall be thrust through, and everyone that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. Their children also shall be dashed into pieces before their eyes. Their houses shall be spoiled, and the wise ravished. That's right. All the sins, all the curses that happened to us and allude to Deuteronomy 30 and 7, it's going to happen to our enemies. You see what I'm saying? Which include rape. Okay? Behold, I will stir up the Medes amongst against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. Their bows shall dash the young man to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. The eyes shall not spare children. So the Most High is raising up, Magog, the Medes, to do what? To take over America, man. America is going to enter into a war with Russia, and America is going to lose, man. You see what I'm saying? America is going to lose. Okay? All these young boys that signed up to go to the war, they're going to go over there and get destroyed, man. Okay? And call Allah Yahweh Bashim Haushah for that. In Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldeans' excellency shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. So, as Sodom and Gomorrah was totally destroyed, okay, that's going to happen to Babylon the Great, which we know to be America, okay? That's how we know this isn't talking about ancient Babylon, because ancient Babylon still inhabited. Sodom and Gomorrah is totally destroyed, wiped off the face of the earth. Okay? It shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherd make their fold there. But wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and the houses shall be full of doleful creatures, and owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there, and the wild beasts of the uh, islands shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons in their pleasant places. And her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged. That's right. So now we're living in a time to where the so-called white man is going to be judged, man. You see, and and one of the attributes of that is, again, his tongue is going to fall on itself, and eventually the Most High is going to wipe him out. Okay, so Most High willing, this was edifying, man.